2 weeks. All it took was 2 weeks, and the journalists have proudly admitted to being grifters. In a repeat of what journalists did for Redfall and Cyberpunk, journalists use their access journalism, which gives them time with the game before anyone else can see it, to deceive gamers into purchasing the game. Veilguard is yet another case. They gave the game huge praise, were giving it high grades, but more importantly, they targeted and played on the hopes and expectations of gamers looking forward to the next Dragon Age game. Gamers had good cause for concern with the game wandering too far away from the original Dragon Age Origins base. A dark fantasy game with grim situations, sometimes hard choices, and a party of allies that sometimes did not get along very well at all with each other, Morgan and Alistair being the prime example of this. So journalists preyed upon this with the lie, constantly repeated and reinforced that Veilguard is a return to form. That is a promotional line straight from Electronic Arts. Something meant to suggest to gamers that this would be more like Origins and less like what we dread from Veilguard. It was a complete lie. Story, characters, setting, tone, gameplay, party control, customization options, conversation options. Whether you like it or not, every single thing in Veilguard is as far as possible from Origins as can be. The last thing anyone with an ounce of journalistic integrity would say is return to form. Journalists lied, and now they have been proven grifters. They admit they were giving too high of scores as they start to critique the game. Everything they accuse others of doing, they do themselves. Some of them are admitting they never liked the game, but just enjoy that gamers dislike it, taking open pleasure from a game being falsely marketed to the gaming community by both the journalists and the studio itself. Others are walking back praise that at launch made it seem like this was one of the best games ever made, some outlets even claiming this was BioWare's best game ever. Now, not even a month after they lied to sell the game, they are not only critiquing the game, but they are repeating the critiques that gamers and content creators had at launch, and that journalists were calling gamers all the regular bigot-related terms that they do when someone disagrees with them. Curious, why was it bigotry for gamers to call out Veilguard for the things it was doing just 2 weeks ago, but today when these journalists do the exact same thing, none of their fellow games media drones are doing the same? It is, of course, because they think like a hive mind, and exist on an us versus them binary. They don't care about anything they talk about. They abandon their allies on a finger snap. 2 weeks ago, the orders from above were protect this game at any cost. Push it on the masses. Attack any who disagree. The orders today are the game has bombed and it is time to try and salvage our reputations, as they somehow still do not realize that they are a complete joke and everyone knows that they are liars. Just 2 weeks. But when the orders come, they must follow them like good little corporate soldiers. For all the criticisms one can have of the game's media, even I have to respect their unending loyalty to their corporate masters. You can tell a lot about people by what they do in a crisis, and journalists are in a crisis in 2024. They are afraid of losing their job to AI. They are afraid of content creators who are far more reliable and invested in gaming taking their share of the pie. They are afraid of their corruption and bad faith arguments being revealed. They are afraid of everyone now noticing all the outlets act like a cartel, repeating each other to give themselves the veneer of professionalism and legitimacy, which, like any illusion, once you notice, you become immune to it forever. They are afraid of all their insults on gamers and threats to HR departments and the bullying they do to devs behind the scenes coming into the light. You can tell a lot about people from what they do in a crisis. And when the journalists were called out for ethics a decade ago, they doubled down. rather than proving they weren't being bribed, that access journalism wasn't making them beholden to AAA studios, that they had the best for the gaming peasantry in mind, that they were professionals, serious about providing fair and accurate information to allow gamers to make good decisions on what games we support or do not. They decided to go all in on corruption, bullying, and cancel culture to support the ruinous implementation of DEI that even if corporations now wanted to back out, it will take years to even partially expunge. A decade ago, it was a bundle of bad actors. The journalists not involved could have called out the behavior and taken action against it. They could have investigated the accusations of corrupt journalism and tried to prove it wrong, or shown honesty and confirmed what gamers were starting to be aware of. They could have shown integrity, and they could have saved their reputations. Journalists instead closed ranks, instead deceived everyone for years. And now it is not some bad apples being called out like in the first so-called Gamergate. Gamergate 2 is calling out the entire industry, all of the journalists, those who partake in the corruption, and those who know about it but play defense or obfuscate. And all of them, the entire corporate games media Goliath, has been judged and found guilty not by content creators, but by the public. It is the public whose trust has been lost, and because that trust is lost, the public looks for someone they can trust, and that is what has driven them to content creators. They are afraid as a whole, because as a whole, they have misbehaved, and as a whole, they will be replaced by content creators who are not beholden by corporations, nor by SJWs and the woke, nor by the games media hive mind. Content creators who live and die by the sword of their own audience's perception, who can either be authentic and trusted by those who follow them, or fail to provide what their audience looks to them for. Yes, you may already be aware that many journalists are jumping ship. You'll see Kotaku and other media activists either leaving the games industry entirely or moving to other media outlets, as their only possible future is to rely upon a corporation. The amount of games journalists who have built up enough trust for themselves over the time in media corporations they had to become solo content creators is minuscule. There are, though, going to be very anti-woke, very woke, moderates, non-wokes, non-culture war, and so forth content creators. The saturation will change from the days when it was purely a media industry of radicalized extremists whose primary goal is spreading ideology, not reporting on the games, and games media going forward with content creators at the forefront will become exactly as varied and diverse as the gamers themselves. It's almost a beautiful irony, is it not, that the final act of the corrupt journalism class that so often preached of needing games to reflect the audience is going to be perishing to become the fertile soil for a content creator boom that fulfills that exact dream.